ladies and gentlemen, let's get started with our videos tonight. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 videos tonight. So we got to get started because we have the first video is on lesson 5.3, and then the video 2 and 3 is on lesson 5.4. We're going to combine the last 2 lessons that we are going to do from Unit 5 tonight and do it in one video. All right, so let's just get real busy with it. Today, on this first video, we are going to apply what we've learned to write proportions. So we're going to write them. We learned about proportions yesterday, about 2 ratios that are equal. Our essential question, how can you write a proportion from a real life problem? So let's get started. They gave you the easiest one to start with to write proportions from, and that would be a two-way table. So from the top of page 173, you took some notes. So remember, watch this, and if there's anything that you want to write down afterward, pause the video and write that down. And I'm going to talk about the fact that, hey, with this two-way table, I have 4 pieces of information. I can actually write 8 proportions from this data that are all correct. We're going to talk about the 2 most common ways to write them, so I'm only going to write 2 with you right here. And the 2 most common ways are from the rows, those are what's going side to side, and from the columns. That's what goes up and down, right? Columns go up and down, rows go side to side. So we're going to start off by talking about proportions again. Proportions. Remember, proportions are 2 ratios that are equal. So you can write what I call a proportion template. This proportion template sets you up with 1 ratio equal to another, because we know a proportion is a mathematical sentence that shows 2 ratios are equivalent. So ladies and gentlemen, talking about the rows. In the first one, we talk about the rows. We have the trip 1 and trip 2 for the miles. And then we have the gallons for trip 1 and trip 2. So there's my 2 ratios. I'm going to go miles, 104, in trip 1, to the miles, 78, for trip 2. And then I'm going to do the gallons for trip 1, that's 4. And I'm going to do the gallons for trip 2, that's 3. And I've got this proportion that I've made using rows. And then, of course, I could do cross products, and I would get 104 times 3, and I would get 78 times 4. And of course, when you multiply those together, you do get 312. And you can see that that is a proportion, ladies and gentlemen. And that works. And that's doing it by the rows. Then we have the columns. The columns would be going down. I would be using trip 1 this time, and I would go miles to gallons. And then I'd go trip 2, and I'd go miles to gallons. I'm going to use my red here and show you, a lot of people think the columns is the easiest way, because really, right in the table, you could write your proportion template just like that. And you would end up with 104 over 4 is the same as 78 over 3. Just like that. Now recognize, ladies and gentlemen, again, if I do my cross products, I'm multiplying 104 times 3. And I'm multiplying 78 times 4. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if we look back at our rows, we're multiplying the same numbers again. So we know these are equal because we've already done it. So the columns is probably the most easiest, simplest to understand and to write when it comes to writing these proportions. Those are the 2 most common ways. And again, I could write 8 of them, so there's 6 more that I could write. I'm not going to sit here and bore you with all the details. We can certainly do that in class if someone wants to ask what would be the other 6. So let's go right into some examples and write some proportions from some tables. We're going to use these tables to write a proportion. In the first one, we have the two-way table. It shows day 1 and day 2 for the number of wins and the number of races. And so I'm going to just do it by the columns this time. And I can go right here and I can say, I can write my proportion just like that. So my template, 2 ratios that are equal, using the table, set up for me pretty easily. The number of wins for day 1 to the number of races in day 1 is to the number of wins in day 2 to the number of races in day 2. So I have W over 21 is equal to 8 over 12. That's just one way. There's 7 other ways I could write that. And you know one of them, that would be with the rows. Let's go to example number 2. In example number 2, we have hurricanes and storms for August and September. In this one, I'm going to use the rows. Okay, so I'm going to use the rows. In other words, I'm going to take my proportion template. I always write that first, by the way. My proportion template. And I'm going to write the number of hurricanes from August to September, 2 to 1. And the number of storms from August to September, 6 to n. And there's my proportion. That will help me solve it. All right? Moving forward. Writing from a real life situation. It says the school requires 2 teachers for every 45 students. Write a proportion that gives the number T of teachers needed for 315 students. So I've got my proportion template right here. And when I go back and mark my text, it says the school requires 2 teachers for every 45 students. Well, that's a ratio right there. That is a ratio right there. I can go 2 teachers for every 45 students. So I'm going to write teachers and students. Now this is going to help me because over here, my second ratio, to be consistent with my units, I've got to have teachers on the top and students on the bottom. So I look at the rest of the information that's given us, and it says write a proportion that gives the number T for teachers. So that goes where the teachers belong. Needed for 315 students. That goes where the students belong. So I get 2 over 45 is T over 315. 2 is the 45 as T is the 315. Very simple, very straightforward. Using the information that is given us, marking our text, using your proportion template, filling in the information, being consistent with the units. I know that's a lot to remember. I also know that you can do it. Moving right along to our last example for this video. Yesterday you downloaded 3 songs for $2.97. How many songs did you download today for $7.92? So again, we have 2 ratios to write. We're going to make them equal, writing our proportion template. And our first proportion is given to us. 3 songs and $2.97. And I'm going to write this backwards for you. I'm going to write $2.97 on top for every 3 songs. How many songs did you download today for $7.92? So we recognize that money has to go on top for this to be consistent. So I go $7.92, and then how many songs? Well, I don't know how many songs. I've got to represent that with a variable. So I have $2.97 over 3 is to $7.92 over X. Nice. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have your first quick write of the night, writing a proportion from there are 3 referees for every 16 players. Write a proportion that gives the number of referees R for 128 players. And of course, I'm going to start you off by saying, write your proportion template. Then take a quick break, come back and see me for our second video.